I realize that hardly a weekend passes without the television having a golf tournament coverage. Men and women pushing a little white ball around acres and acres of green meadows and through the sandy dunes, all for the glory and finance of winning, of course. Somehow I never feel too bad about the fellow who misses a putt, except when the announcer says, "Oh, how sad, that just cost him $40,000. I might at first have sympathy, until I find out that now he's only going to get $80,000 for second place instead of $120 for first. Oh, well, of course, there's a lot of talent involved with all the golf, but there's some good humor about golf as well. There's a story, for example, of the golfer who goes to a course where he's never played before. He puts the ball on the tee, he takes a practice swing, and then makes the official swing. He misses the ball completely. He gets set again, swings once more, and misses the ball again completely. You know what he told the others around him? "This is the toughest course I've ever played on." Well, how about the story of the Christmas time discussion between two golfers? You can see how this can get in. One says to the other, "Did you have a good Christmas at your house?" And the other fellow says, "Oh, yes, I got a new set of irons for my wife." And the first golfer says, "Well, that's terrific. What a great trade." "Ooh, got a new set of irons for my wife. What a trade." Well, then there's the story of the golfer who sliced his tee shot out to the highway. He hit a car in the windshield, causing it to smack into another car and then a tree. 3 people were seriously injured. Ambulances and police cars are on the scene. People are screaming, and the golfer's partner says, "Look what you did there with that shot. What are you going to do about it?" Golfer, "Well, I think I'll bring my thumb around a little more on the right of to the right of my grip." Ooh, yes. Now, these things never happen, of course, to me when I'm playing golf, but I'm certainly no authority on mastering the links. No, of course not. One time I had a caddy who kept looking at his watch. I said to him, "How come you're always looking at your watch?" He says, "This is no watch. It's a compass." And if you'd see my golf game, you'd understand why he had it. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's think about some of the jargon of golf. I wonder how sophisticated the way of saying things. For example, could we do a little better with sand trap? Sand trap. That sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? This old English professor here at Mount Union says sand trap. What could we? Oh, let's call it an area of dry aggregate concentration. It might be pretty good. And for the fairway, we could refer to that as an area of mature blade development. Oh, my. Well, that's what happens, of course. And it happens because, well, the old English professors get into that. Yes. And many years ago, the celebrity Dean Martin came up with an exhortation that I really, really love very much about. He says, "If you drink, don't drive. Don't even putt." And so that's it. I better stop now before you get teed off about something I'm saying. Back with you next week. Well, this old English professor likes to recall his classes at Mount Union. I treasure them very much. I recall this one time I had no trouble figuring out the grade on the paper. It was an F. I mean, it was a solid failing grade on the paper. I do have to admit that the paper was of fairly satisfactory appearance, except for that ghastly aspect of the grade of F. I mean, the theme had been written on a computer, the dot matrix scheme quite evident, the margins were smooth, the work of the mechanical word processor, the whole thing, but it was a failing grade. After all, the paper was just 3 pages, and it had a grand total of 14 misspelled words on 3 pages. And after marking each one, I remember circling each one with my pen. And I had another comment or two, but the overall message was satisfactory. The problem was simply centered on those 14 misspelled words. That's it. I was going to learn something, too. This is back many years ago, but I've never forgotten it because, well, when the student picked up his paper in class, he was sorely displeased. And he expressed that displeasure to me in no uncertain terms. He says, "You're going to give me a grade of F on this paper. How can that be a grade of F?" I said, "Well, you have 14 misspelled words, young man. That's about one word out of every 25 misspelled on this paper." And the young man said, "Well, it can't be that bad." I said, "Well, now, take a look here, son. You have 14 major errors on 3 pages. And that's certainly enough in English 100 here. That's enough to have a grade of F." And then came the response. He brightened at this point, and he said to me, "Oh, Professor Crist, I didn't make no 14 mistakes." And I said, "You didn't?" "No," he says, "I only made one." "You mean you only had one mistake in the entire paper?" He says, "Well, sure, just one." I said, "How can that be?" He says, "I just forgot to use the correct spell button, that's all." And he was all smiles. He was convinced that now, obviously, a 3-page paper with just one mechanical fault surely deserved a grade of A or B, and he knew that I would understand. I remember staring at the blackboard. Writing papers in class becomes more like piloting spaceships every year. You learn to push buttons. You can push the right buttons, then you blast off and orbit the globe. Machine does it all for you. What kind of reasoning could I use for defense of the grade that I put on that paper? Oh, well, so it happens. I keep learning. That's one value of teaching. One keeps learning. Only had one mistake. I just forgot to press the spell button. Back with you next week. Hello, and I'm thinking about driving along the highways at 55 miles an hour, listening to the gleeful whiz of trucks and cars and motorcycles that zap by me. I find time to enjoy a bit of the scenery, of course, soak up some of the profound messages on the car radio. Now, maybe other drivers can do this at 80 miles an hour. I don't know. I've not tried that. I do know, however, that one's education can be significantly enlarged, picking up some of the deep commercial messages. I mean, how do you suppose anybody actually believes all those trumped-up hidden microphone accounts of the awesome realization by some dear lady that, by golly, this cleaner is brighter than my old one? Well, I wonder. Well, anyway, a number of trips recently across the country have afforded me a chance to pick up a variety of profound messages of different types. Yep. Well, right here in Stark County on one of the radio stations, they were giving a weather report, and they said, and I'm quoting, "There will be sunny skies tonight." How can that be? And to my wonderment, still in Stark County, what about that used car dealer who came on the radio and he said, "We offer a 100% limited warranty." 100% limited. Oh, my. What does that mean? And it reminds me, though, of a news report on car radio that said 65% of the membership voted unanimously to reject the contract offer. 65% voted unanimously. Oh, my. Well, then we have all sorts of... there was another announcer in Ohio who said there's considerable chaos in the Middle East tonight. Chaos. I'd say there's considerable right there in pronunciations. Well, how are we going to do with this? I think this is a very profound statement I heard on the car radio once. Quote, "Prices are lower now than they will be after the increase." Can you imagine that? That's pretty hard to believe, isn't it? Or the Savings and Loan Institution that told me on the car radio, "Now you can get loans at current interest rates." Well, that's very good. What kind of rates would there be except the current ones? Oh, my, south of Alliance, I remember this one sign. They had nice vegetables grown in abundance at this little place, and out in front they had some of them for sale. And the sign said, "Produce, new and used merchandise." It Would you like to eat some used produce? Well, it does happen. We encounter these things on the radios. My favorite car radio announcement, however, was not on a recent jaunt. It occurred on the turnpike near Youngstown. Oh, it's been 20 years ago, I suppose. I've never gotten it out of my mind, though. It was on a Thursday evening. I was in the right-hand lane at about 55 miles an hour. I was being buffeted about in the tailwind of semis and cycles. Anyway, I picked up a local sportscaster interviewing a high school football coach. And this is what I heard. Tell me, Coach, how important is that game tomorrow night on your schedule? Well, I'd have to say that this is one of those ball games that you're going to have to win if you're going to go through the season undefeated. I was impelled to pull over to the berm and contemplate that deep, awesome statement. It's one of those ball games you're going to have to win if you're going to go through the season undefeated. This is one of those Wiles with Lyles that I'm going to have to stop. Oh, I'm not quite sure why, but I will. Back with you next week.